All right, so this next video is going to be on socketing or snapping objects to a spot. This is really comes in handy if you're doing some form of a escape room or puzzle game or something that you need to pick up and then be able to put in a specific spot. Um, so that's what we're going to cover today. I know there are a few of you that were looking for information on that. So for this, I'm going to continue my build on my data scene. Um, just the one I had open. It doesn't really matter, but that's the one I am building this continuation off of. So what we're going to do is we need to create a hand for our player, something that we can pick something up with. And so we're just going to go to our player, right click to add a 3D object, and we'll just make it a sphere. You see that it pops up in the body, which we don't want. I'm going to change before it goes away. I'm just going to call it hand. And then we're going to shrink it. I'm going to move it out first. I'm just going to kind of move it out to the side. Treat it as, because our gun is in the right hand, so we're going to treat this as a left hand. And we're going to set the size. I don't know. Let's see what 0.2 does. That's not bad. I'll bring it a little tighter to the body and maybe move it forward just a little bit. We want to make sure though that we can see it here in our game screen, right? And so then let's also go ahead and let's make it green just like the body. So current material that's on the player is the player material, which is green. So we can just drag that there. And now we've got a green hand. Easy to see. All right. Now, what we want to do is we're going to create a pick-upable game object, right? We're going to create a tag that will be pick-upable. Yeah, so we're going to handle that in the tag action. So what we're going to do, we're just going to go ahead and put, we're going to actually put this in an empty game object. And I'll explain why we're going to do that as we go along. So we're just going to create an empty game object. We're going to call it, it doesn't matter what we call it. Let's call this battery. We'll make two things. We'll just start with one though, and then we'll just copy the other one over. So we're going to create a battery, and then into battery. So with the empty game object, right? We just have an object here that gives us a transform. Basically, that's all it is. So we can kind of set this wherever. Let's move it a little bit in front of the player. And then to the battery as a child, we're going to add a 3D game object. Let's make it a cylinder. We can just leave this cylinder. We're not going to access that name. But we're going to do, let's change the scale again. We don't want it to be too big since it's a battery, right? Doesn't need to be too big. But what we want to specifically do, right? This is set to the 0, 0. So what we want is to be able to set this on top of something. So I'm going to just make this a nice even 0.5 just to have it there. And then we're going to actually move this guy up to, I think we can move it to 0.3. And we want, there, we've got it. We want to put that transform right at the bottom. And that's going to be our socketing point for this. Because then we're going to set it on top of the hand, and then we're going to also build a little shelf that we would set this on. And so what we want to do with that, because it's going to go on top of something, we want to set this transform point to the bottom. If this was going to socket into something from below and snap onto the top, we would switch it and have the cylinder instead. I think we can just switch this to negative 0.3 right? And so now we have it on the top. And this is going to be our snap 2 point, right? This is one half of that feature. I'm going to go ahead and put it back the way it was because I want it to snap on the bottom. If you want to snap in the middle or on the side, you just set it to that way. All right, now what we're going to do, so now that we have this, we're going to go ahead and create a new tag, and let's call this add tag grabbable. 2 B's, or 3 B's actually. And actually, while we're here, we're going to need this as we go on. So we have a grabbable object, but we're going to also want something to be called the drop point, or I'm going to call it drop point. So I'll have a tag for that. That's going to then be basically where the grabbable object, where this transform is going to connect to that drop point transform. So we've got those set. We're going to come back to our battery and make sure that we set it to grabbable. And we can go ahead and save. And then what we want to do, we're going to do this on our controller. So I'm going to go to my controls, the player. I'm going to go to the actions and pick another, or set another action. We'll call it pickup. And we'll leave it as a button. That's great. And the binding for this, I'm going to go ahead, since it is the left hand, I'm going to actually go ahead and bind this to the left trigger on the gamepad. So when I want to pick something up, all I need to do is pull that left trigger. And remember to go ahead and use it in the control scheme. So I'm just going to click it on both, just because I can never remember which one I'm using all the time. So we're just going to go ahead and set it that way. All right. And now what we're going to do, let's go ahead and create that drop-off object. So let's create a, for this one, we're going to do it the opposite way. So we're going to go ahead and create a cube. Definitely not that big. Let's set it to, I don't know, 0.2s. It looks okay. Maybe let's make it to 0.3. We'll just make it the same so it'll fit really nice. And then what we'll want to do, let's go ahead and move that cube over here to this wall. F to zoom in on it. I'm going to go ahead and then do E to be able to change my rotation, just to rotate a little bit, just to make it look a little nicer. And just kind of set it in the wall. We'll kind of bump it up just a little bit. That's probably fine there. And then we could call this like, I'm just gonna leave it cube. It doesn't really matter if you, in this case, it doesn't matter if you want it to be something specific, like light sconce or like battery inputs, whatever it is. That is perfectly fair and okay to do. But for this one, we just don't really need that. So we're just going to leave it as cube. And then to the cube, though, we're going to go ahead and add an empty. And we'll go ahead, we'll just leave, it just can stay game object, but we're going to go ahead and raise that up once again to the top, right? So I'm connecting on the bottom. Just set this to 0.5. And then I want it to connect. Basically, when I socket it or snap it, it's going to go ahead and snap to that point there. So I want it to snap on top of our cube, and it's going to be the bottom of the battery. And then remember what we want to actually do for this on our game object, not the cube, but the game object. We want to set this to a drop point. We want to be able to make this a spot. Okay, that's the setup we need to do. Actually, let's just do the other setup. Let's go ahead. We're going to set up one last thing. I'm going to take the battery. So I said we're going to do this anyway. Let's just do it now. Let's do the battery. Let's set the cylinder. Let's do it in a second. Let's go ahead and just duplicate the battery. We'll just move it over to this side. I think that's perfectly fine. But instead of battery, we're going to call it taco. If you haven't realized yet, I do have a passion thing for tacos. So let's go ahead for a battery. Let's pick a different material. So on the cylinder, we want to, let's just make it a red battery. it doesn't matter, right? This could be whatever. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the red and then change it to taco. And then I'm going to set it to more of a orangey yellow, nice corn tortilla. So there, you can see it's all shiny in that. So I'm just gonna drop the metallic and our smoothness. So it just gives it a little bit rougher. And then I'll drag taco onto the taco cylinder. All right, we've got that all set up. Now we're gonna get into the code, right? So we have 2 grabbable things and we have 1 drop-off point. So let's go into our code. My codes are getting a little full here, so I'm going to go ahead and actually just create a folder for this. I'm going to call it snap code. All right, so in here, we're going to go ahead and create a new C# script. We're going to start with just going through the process of being able to pick it up, then we'll add being able to drop it off, and then we'll go into kind of checking to see what's what. And changing some colors too, because that's important. So let's go ahead and get, I'm going to go ahead and change this script name to snap to hand, right? So that's the main thing we want to be able to do, is first pick up an object, put it in our hand. So we're going to go ahead and do that. All right, let's, because we are have already started using the input system, we're going to go ahead and do our normal using Unity engine dot input system, right? So that's going to give us the ability to call directly out to that input system or capture inputs directly. All right. For this, we're going to create 2 arrays because we've got the 2 different things. So we're going to do a private game array of game objects. An array is just instantiated by doing the open close straight brackets, and we're going to call one of these grabbable objects. And the other one we're going to call not grabbables, but we're going to call object drop points, right? So we need a list of all the grabbable objects in our scene and a list of all the drop points in the scene. We're going to throw in another one. We're going to go ahead and do a private bool this time. And that's going to be holding object, right? We need, that's not how you spell holding. Holding object. We're going to set it to false, right? So, goodness gracious. Autocorrect or autofill. So we want to start at false, right? We're not starting holding an object, but we want to know if we have an object that we are holding at any one time. And then we're going to go ahead and we want to have a private game object. This is going to be called object held, right? We need to know what the object we are holding, if we are holding something. And we also want a game object, private game object, drop point, right? So this is the drop point that we're selecting basically. Okay, let's start making some headway with this. So in our start, like we did when we were getting our wall information, so we'll do an if grabbable objects equals null, or because there are a few of you that had some issues with this, or grabbable objects dot count equals 0. So basically, we know that where this script is going, there is going to be some grabbable objects. So we want to make sure that we fill that in. So then we're going to say grabbable objects equals game object dot find objects. Make sure it's S in there, objects of type, and then, or I'm sorry, objects. Let's just go back and start some numbers. So we want grabbable objects equals game object dot find game objects with tag. That's what we want. Remember, objects, not object, with tag, and then we're just gonna type in here our grabbable, which is our tag name for that. And that's going to go ahead, when we start this up, it's going to search through the scene, find every game object with that tag grabbable, and put it into our array. And then we're going to do the same thing if object drop points equals null, or object drop points dot count equals 0. Then we're going to do the same thing. Object drop points equals game object dot find game objects with tag drop point. So that's going to, at the very start, when we start up our game, it's going to go through and it's going to search through the entire scene. What's a grabbable object? Throw it into the grabbable objects array, and then what's a drop point, and throw that into the object drop points array. So now we can cycle through those as we need. All right, we're going to keep our update because we're going to play with some colors later on, but we're going to get there. I will at least let you know that the code for this is a bit long, just because we're going to be playing with the colors. If we didn't want to play with colors, and I'll show you why the colors can be really beneficial, but if we didn't want to play with colors, this would definitely be a much shorter code. But we do want that color aspect. So we're going to create a new public void. And because this is, let's go out to our Unreal again, right? So our player, we're going to actually, we need to do, in our hand, we actually need to do a player input. So add component player input. We're going to once again come to our assets, drag in our my controls into the actions. We'll set this scheme to gamepad. Unclick the auto switch. We'll leave it player because that's what it is. We'll have our main camera be our camera. And then this allows us that access of all the ons, right? So now we have this on pickup here, and that's what we're going to use in our code. So with that set, we can come back here. It's angry that I haven't finished it, but we're going to do public void on pickup. So now it's going to get passed through as we need. All right, so we're going to start with what we set up originally as the bool. So we're going to first check and see if we're holding the object, right? So if we are holding an object, then we're going to want to be able to drop it, whether we drop it and attach it to a potential drop point, or just drop it in the scene, right? We need to be able to do both. And so that's what we're setting up here in this position. So with this, we're going to check and see if we're going to create a float, and I'm going to call it D distance. So this is going to be distance to a drop-off point is 3 meters or close. Or I'm just going to start as 3 meters, right? Do we actually get closer than that? And so then we're going to do a for int I equals 0, I is, and we want this the object drop points. Oops. Object drop points dot count I plus plus, and then we're going to do one more float. I'm going to call this DD for, once again, drop off distance, and we're going to get the vector 3 dot distance, right? So we want to know the distance between the object held. So this is, we're going to set this when we pick something up. This is we're in the drop off phase. We're going to set this to our object held transform dot position and compare the distance with that to object drop points. And we want to then do I in there for which spot on our array is it. So check those. And then we're going to say if dd is if dd is less than d distance, then we're going to say that d distance, because say we're working through like 30 drop-off points in this game. We want to just see which is the close one, right? And we're not going to drop be able to drop an item that we're holding onto a drop point unless it's closer than 3 meters, which is still actually gameplay pretty decent distance away. You can easily dial this in a bit, but we want to set that. And so what we'll do is we'll say that then d distance, because we're going to be going through our entire list of object drop points. So then we're going to set, when we find one that's closer than 3 meters, we're going to go ahead and then set now that to be the new closest point. So we're going to set that to dd. And if we found that, we're going to call it our drop point object. Game object is equal to object drop point I. So whichever one it is in the array. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and... So this is checking to see, is there a drop point that's within 3 meters of us? And it's going to reset to that 3 meters each time. So if that is the case, we're going to have two options, right? We're going to have if drop point does not equal null, and then the opposite, we'll just do this an else. So this is going to be if drop point is null, right? We did this check, and there is no drop point within. So on the trigger, when we hit the trigger, it's going to do our on pickup. If we're holding an object, it's first going to see, is there a drop-off point within the range? And if there is, which one is it? And then if there's 2 in the range, it's going to find whichever one's closer, right? Because we're changing this d distance to constantly be getting smaller based on the ones that we find. And then, so if we have, if there's nothing to drop, right? All of a sudden, we're just going to drop it back into the array, into our spot. And then if there is something, then we're going to go ahead and attach it to it. But before we get there, because I think this is a little bit out of order, so let's go. So if we're holding an object, we haven't held an object yet, so let's pick up the object first. This at least sets the framework for this, but let's get in a little bit better order. So then we'll just do an else here. So right, so this is coming out to our if holding an object. So if we are holding something, do this. If we're not holding an object, that's what's going to happen here. And so what we're going to also do with this is, so this is not measuring for a drop-off point. This is measuring for the grabbable object distance. So we're going to do very similar to what we did. A float, we'll call it G distance for grabbable distance. In this case, we want to be a little closer, or I would like us to be a little closer to the object to grab it the first time than dropping it off. Gives a little bit more player error range with the drop off. So we're going to say float G distance, and then we're going to do the same basic thing for int I equals 0, I grabbable objects dot count I plus plus. Oh, didn't want to play nice. All right, and so then, like we did before, now we're going to do a float GD, grabbable distance equals the vector 3 dot distance. And we're going to do this from the hand, which is our transform position, because this code is going on to our hand. So we're going to do transform position, which gets our hands position. And then we're going to go through grabbable objects and just kind of cycle through all those, right? So that's going to then check which grabbable object and they're transformed for that. And so like we did before, if the so if, sorry, got a little brain confused for a moment. If GD, so our grabbable distance is less than our overall grabbable distance, we're going to say that the G distance is equal to GD, and then we're going to say that the object held is equal to the grabbable object's I, right? So if there is something in range, we're going to put it into the object held. And that's going to go through the list. Once again, if it's something else is closer, it's going to grab the closest one to us because it's going through that entire list. And so then we're going to say after this, if object held doesn't equal nothing, right? So doesn't equal null, we're going to then attach this to the player. And we do that by setting the object held. So, right, we've gotten the reference to the object held. And we want object held, transform dot parent. So we're setting the parent of it. If you go to, I'm just going to save this for a moment. It's going to yell at me in a minute, but that's okay. Right, so we're creating the object. So battery or taco, whichever one we pick up, it's going to become a child of hand. We're setting hand to be the parent of this object. And so that's where that's going to go. So is equal to game object, because we need to transform, right? So we are transforming the parent of it. We're assigning it to the hand. And then that, if we left it at just this, it would just now, whenever we moved the body, which would move the hand, it would then just stay where it is, right? It would still stay in the distance we were when we grabbed it. And it would just come along with us for the ride. We don't want that. We want it to look like we actually picked it up into our hand. So what we're just going to do at that point, so we've attached the object held to our hand, and then we want to go ahead and do the object held, because we still have this as a game object. Oops, we want object held dot transform. We want the local position on this, right? We don't want a game position or a world position. We just want the local position of the hand. And we do that, so that gives us the hand's local point as their 0, 0. And that's where we want to set this to. So we're just going to do this equals to vector 3, 0. Vector 3.0. This is just going to snap it right to the center of the hand. And then we want... so that's going to bring it there. That's what we want for that. And then at this point, holding object is now true, right? So we've had holding object as false because that's what it starts as. Now we have looked to see if we picked up a number, or if we're in range. When we squeeze the trigger, are we in range within that 2 meters of between our hand and that grabbable object? If so, we're going to go ahead and grab it as long as it's there. If objects tell, if every object is 3 meters or 2 meters or more, right, this game objects held is going to equal null. So we'll never run this code. So actually, we should probably, let's go ahead. I believe we're going to want to actually put that in here. Because where I had it before, that would then, anytime we ran it, even if we didn't grab something, it would say that we're holding an object, and that's not true. Only when we actually pick it up is that going to be true. So we've got that now in there. Okay, let's go back and finish off. So now we have it holding true, right? So now we're coming through here. Are we now close enough to an object drop point? This is going to have two options, right? We have, is there a drop point? Did we find one that's within 3 meters of us? If so, then we're going to go here. When we squeeze the trigger to do our drop off, right? This is on the on pickup trigger pull. So we're going to have one that's going to result in it going to and snapping to that the drop point. The other one's just going to drop it back into the world. So we're going to take the dropping it back into the world first, which is great. So we still, once again, we know what the object held was at this point, right? Because that's what we're currently holding. So we got object held, transform, but we already have it in a parent, right? Because that's what we did here. We set the parent to equal the transform. So now what we can just do is come in and say parent is null. That removes it from the parent it's attached to and brings it back into its own parent at that point, which is great. What we'll do at this point, we'll say that object held is null as well, right? So that's going to allow us to reset this. Object held would currently have a value, but we want to set that to nothing. And we can say that holding an object also equals false, right? So now we can come back through and go through the trying to pick something up again. So that's going to just drop it back into the world. And then if there actually is a drop point, right? If drop point is null or is not null, we found a drop point. We're going to come here and we're going to say that the object held transform parent, right? We still need to transform the parent, but this time we're going to, instead of having it connect to our hand object, we're going to now switch that to our drop point, which we found, right? And so then what we want to do, this is a little bit, sort of a little trickier. We want to do object held, because we want to move it to the 2 snap points to connect, right? So object held, like we did before, transform dot local position. But this is now going to be the drop point transform, and we want its transform vector to be vector 3.0. Whew. So what we're doing with this is we're getting the vector that it's attaching to and putting it at the 0 for this local position, right? It was in a different local position, and now we need to transform that to a new local position. So this is what's going to get us there. We're going to also now say that drop point is null, right? We are done with that drop point. We are no longer holding an object, so object held is null. And hold, we need to put this semicolon on there. And holding object is false, right? So this is now going to allow us to pick something else up again. Okay, let's save this. And if everything goes according to plan, I am not holding my breath as of yet, we're going to be able to pick this up. We need to first go ahead and add the new script, snap to hand onto our hand. And that is all there and good. We don't need anything else attached to it at this point. Let's hit play. All right. Oh, let me change one thing real quick because otherwise it's going to be. I apologize, I didn't catch this earlier. So when we go to our grabbable items, um, if we were to, I'll just show you what I'll do. Because the way we have this set up, I come over here and I can pick up. Oops, I gotta hit the right button. I always hit the A for some reason. Pick up our battery game object. So if we come up here now, you'll see the hand has battery attached to it, right? Just like we were doing, we parented to it. So now I can just drop it at this point. You see it comes out of there, and battery is going to go all the way down to the bottom of the bullets, and we have it again. But it's now attached on my hand, and it's going to cause wacky things to happen. There are other ways to fix this, but what we're going to just do to make it easy, because it's not, the collider on there is not important at this point. So I'm just going to turn off the capsule collider for both the taco and the battery. So now when we save this and then run it again, we'll pick it up, and now I drop it, and now nothing weird's happening. But now I can pick it up and come over here. And it should be close enough. I drop it off, and it snaps right to there. If I get close again, I can just grab it again, bring it over, switch out the battery for the taco, and put it there. The trick, though, is like, right, how do I know that these objects, let's say I put them on a table or something like that, how am I going to know that this is something I can actually pick up and interact with? So what we're going to do is we're going to change some colors on that to represent that a visual just showing of that. So, and this is where the code's going to definitely get a lot longer because we're going to put a whole bunch of code here in our update. And actually, we're going to start first by adding some other variables because we need to track some stuff. So we want to have a private material, and we're going to call it the grabbable color. We want to track. So when we pick something up, we're going to change its color. But we want to be able to change it back to the color it was when we drop it, right? Because that would just be silly to leave it a changed color. And actually, we want to be able to, when we pick it up, switch from the showing it it's grabbable to now it's the color again, so that we don't like, oh shoot, maybe it's a color puzzle, right? I can't remember what color I picked up. Now I got to drop it, remember the color, and then pick it up again. So we're just gonna forever track what that grabbable color was originally. We're gonna also change a material or have a material for the drop point color because we're gonna want to do that as well. And then we'll do a public material, and we'll call it hand color, right? So our hand's going to be changing colors as well because we want to make sure that the object is pick-upable by our hand. So we're going to need to make sure that that is conveyed as well. So hand color, and then we're going to create or I have one, I'll show you what I did. So we'll create an alert color. And the alert color is going to be when we get close, it's going to change that color to alert us that we can do something with it, right? And then we just need to create private game object because we're going to be tracking something a little different before we actually grab it. So private game object, and we're going to call it a possible pickup. And a private game object, possible drop point. Okay, let's go down to our update where the color magic is going to happen. So this is going to run off of this exact same Boolean that we've been using this entire time. So if holding an object and if holding an object, and we're going to have an else, right? So if you're not holding an object, those are going to be our main ones. Actually, we want to with this. We're going to do this a little differently. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Because we want to look at this we still want to use the holding object, but we want to check a couple extra things because we're going to be changing our colors back and forth. So we're going to first start with if you're not holding an object, and possible pickup. Pickup, right? This is something that we're potentially able to pick up, equals null. Is where we're going to start with this. And then we're going to, so this is, we don't have an object to hold, and we don't even know that there's anything in the range to pick up at this point. And so then we're going to, and I'm just going to put the next else in here, else if, we're going to still stick with holding object is false, but in this case, possible pickup is not null. We actually have something that we could pick up. Is going to be our two options in here. So if there is nothing we're not holding anything and we don't know that there's something possible to pick up near us, we're going to go ahead. We're going to use the same distances as we did before. We're going to use the 2 and the 3. 2 for picking up an item, 3 for the drop point. So we're going to use 2 for this one. So float, we're going to use the same GDist. We're going to set it to the 2 like we did previously. And then we're going to do the exact same code almost. We're going to say for int I equals 0, I grabbable objects count, and I plus plus, right? So that's going to loop us through that array, just like we did up here. And then we're going to, within here, do a float. We'll just do GD again. Grab our possible PGD. We'll call is what we'll call that one. That's getting confusing. Let's call it possible GD. And we're going to call that equal to a vector 3 distance. It's going to get the transform position from the hand. Remember, this is all the hand, between the hand and the object. So the transform position and the grabbable objects I transform position. So we're just measuring that possible interaction. Maybe we can pick this up, right? Position. But we don't want that. We want a semicolon. And now we're going to say an if possible GD is less than our GDist, less than 2. We're going to say that the GDist is equal to our possible GD, and possible pickup is now equal to that grabbable object that we found on our array. So that's going to give us that piece of information. Okay, so once we've come through here, we've found out that yes, there actually is something there. We're not going to bounce out of this for loop yet. We're going to actually come over and say if possible pickup is not null, right? We're going to have our grabbable color equal to the possible pickup dot transform. And in this case, let me pause here for just a quick second. In this case, taco or battery is the parent object, right? But the color is on the child, right? Our cylinders are the child of our battery and taco. So we need to get this color, right? Battery has no color, it's just a transform. So we need to be able to get that. And so to get that, and because it is just the one and only under there, we're going to go ahead and, let me scroll this back up, do get child. And we need to say the position of it, and in this case, it's the one and only at the top. So it's the first one on the list, and it's the only one. If we needed to get, let me come back and show. If we added a 3D object sphere, right, and we needed to access this, we would then set this to get child 1. It's the second one on the list. Once again, this is the top and only. And then if we wanted to, let's say we actually needed to get the sphere, which is now a child of the cylinder, we would do get child 0 dot get child 0 to be able to access it as we go down. But we only need to do the first one. I'm going to go ahead and delete that sphere before I forget. So we just need to do the get child 0 dot component, or get component dot renderer dot material. So we've set this up as a material, right? Possible pickup or grabbable color is a material. So we're just getting the material from the current game object. And then we're going to go ahead and then say possible pickup dot transform. Once again, we have to do the get child because that's what we're going after. That doesn't sound exactly right that we're going after the child, but that's what we're going after, is the child game object. Get component renderer again, and this time we're going to say material equals the alert color. Right, so we stored the material for if we need to play with it later. But right now we're just going to assign it the alert color. And we're going to also assign the hand, so which is just our game object, get component, render material alert color. Right, so we're not just assigning it to the cylinder, we're going to also assign it to the hand. Okay, we've got that down. So if we're not holding an object and we don't currently have anything to pick up, we're going to see if any of the grabbable objects are within that 2 meters. Go through the list, find the one that's closest, and then we're going to assign that object to a possible pickup. So as long as possible pickup is not null after that, we're going to save the color that it was, replace its color with the alert color, and replace our hand color with the alert color. All right, and let's do the reverse before we check this out. All right, so now we still don't have anything, right? We're still not holding anything, but we do have a possible pickup, right? We've set a possible pickup here. So now this is going to come into play of, great, we were within range and now we're going to go out of range. So we're going to set this float to a little bit longer. We're going to call this our actually we don't even need one for this. We're going to go if vector3 dot distance, and we can just say possible pickup. That's the game object we set, right? Dot transform dot position. and transform dot position are greater than 2, right? We've now moved away from that 2 meter distance. We're going to just say that the possible pickup transform get child, once again 0 dot get component render dot material is going to go back to the grabbable color, right? So we stored the color that it was here, and now we're going to put it back on. We've moved away from it. Grabbable color just goes back. The possible pickup goes back to being null, right? We now cannot pick it up. We're out of range. It's going to allow us to fall back into here. And we're going to then also set our, I'm just going to copy this to save a little bit of time. Game object, get component render material. We're going to set this back to hand color. Okay. Let's go ahead and just test this real quick so you can see what we've been doing. We want to now on our hand, we do want to, we're going to go to our materials. Player is what I have for my hand color, or yours could be green. We're going to drag that to the hand color. And then what we want to do, I'm going to rebuild this one here. But if we select our blue and duplicate it, and we'll just call this one blue T instead of blue transparent, but we're going to set it up the same way. So we have blue T, which we're setting to transparent. We want to go to our rendering mode and set it to transparent. Surprise, surprise, right? And then we want to click on the color on our albedo, and we want to come down here and set the alpha down about half, 3/4. Let's call it about there. We can test this real quick. We'll just put it on that cube. I'm gonna focus on that thing, right? So we've got, you can still a little too much. So we're gonna come in. This is a great way to just kind of test those colors. I'm gonna play with a few things. I don't want it as metallic. A little smoother, and then we can come back in here and drop this a bit more. And there we go. We can see a lot more through it. Maybe we'll go ahead and not as much. So I want these to still stand out a bit. Yeah, it's right about in the middle there. Okay, and then we're just going to come in on the cube. So I'm just going to set it to let's just set it to blue. I don't have the default color. And that's fine. We'll just set it to a solid blue. No, I want it to be better than that. Let's just, here, we'll get it to aqua. That will be very different. Okay, perfect. So that's how we can see. We've got it set there. All right. So now if we hit play, when we move towards this, when we get in range, we now have pink, which we don't want, which we'll fix in a minute. But as you can see, we go to, this should then switch to our blue, which I forgot to add it in there. But now it switches back, right? And then it's going to do the same thing over here. So we can fix the color problem by going ahead and going to our hand. As you can see, I don't have the alert color there, so I'm just going to bring our blue T in. That's what it was looking for. When it didn't have anything, it just gives you that like error pink. So now we restart it. And there we go. Now I've got our alerts. Okay. Perfect. But as you, when we pick it up, currently, come back to picking it up, it stays that, right? We don't want it to stay like that. So let's fix that problem. Okay, so we've gone through our if we're not holding it. So now we're going to do an else if. Else if. So holding object now is true, right? We've picked up the object. But possible drop point, we don't currently have a drop point. So what we want to do with that is we're going to once again play off the numbers we've done before. Float, not flag attribute, float d distance equals 3. And we're going to do, as we've done before, for int I equals 0, I less than possible. It's going to be drop object points, or object drop points. Drop points dot count, and then I plus plus. Okay, so we've got that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a float possible. That is definitely not float. Float possible drop distance vector 3 distance. This is once again going to be our hand position, right? Because that's what we're looking for. So it's transform dot position, and then we're going to go through our object drop points like we've done before and get their transforms. And then once again, as before, if possible dd is less than ddist, we're going to set d distance to the possible dd, and we're going to set a possible drop point to equal the object drop point that we found on our list. And like we've done before, if possible drop points is null, right, we have a drop point, we're going to get our drop point color, because we want to save that, is equal to the possible drop point transform dot parent. So we're going the opposite way with this one, right? Let me swing back over here. For our pickup items, our grabbables, they were the child. For our cube, which is our drop-off point, our drop point is the child. So for this, we care about the cube color in this case. So what we're going to do for that, instead of the child 0, this is parent. If it was multiple levels up, we could do the parent of the parent of the parent of the parent of the parent, however far you have to go. This case, thankfully, we only need to go to parent. We're going to get the component, the renderer once again, and the material, saving that to our drop point color. Then we're going to say that the possible drop point transform parent get component render material, and this is going to once again equal our alert color. So we're going to reuse that alert color. Hey, this is something that you can now, you're within range to do something with this. We're going to change the alert color, and our grabbable color, right? So now we don't really care about our hand as much. Now we care about the object that we're holding, because that's going to be bigger. And we'll set that to switch in just a minute when we pick it up. But for this, we're going to change the grabbable color to, or grabbable color is going to equal to the object being held, right? That's what we got up above, object held, because we now have something. Transform. This is the child though. Get child, because it's on our grabbable. Dot get component. Render. Dot material. And then object held transform get child child 0 again, get component render. We use the render a lot in this. Material equals alert color. Woohoo! Okay, so if we've seen something, if there's an if we're holding something but we don't currently have a spot to drop it, we're going to check and see if there is. Once there is, it's going to change those to our alert colors on the drop point and on the item we're holding. Okay, last one in our update. So else if holding object is true and possible drop point is not null, right? We now have a drop point that we found. We're going to check and see once again if the vector 3 dot distance from our possible drop point dot transform dot position to our, once again, our hand. That's what we care about, the distance from position. And we're going to use the same values as we did previously, which was the 3. So if that's the case, we're just going to put it all back together, right? We've moved too far away. And so we're going to say if, or no, we're just going to cleanse this out. So we're going to go to possible drop point dot transform dot parent. Remember, that's is the one where our drop point is the child, so we need the parent. Get component render material equals drop point color. Our possible drop point is now null, right? We've moved too far away to have one. And our object held transform dot get child 0, because this is the one that's the child. Get component render dot material equals grabbable color. All right, that's going to put it back together. If we ran this right now, it's not going to do anything because it stayed blue, right? So we need to be able to turn off the color and set the color back when we actually pick it up. So we're going to come up to our holding object. We're going to go to our else, because that's when we pick up the object, right? So we're going to, if held does not equal that, right? So this is now we're picking it up. We're going to let's see, we're going to add this. Doesn't necessarily matter, so we're just going to go ahead and let's add it. Just add it to the bottom. Perfectly fine. So we're going to do object held dot transform get child 0 dot get component render material equals the grabbable color, right? So we're setting this, so we've picked it up. We don't need them to show that we can pick them up anymore, right? We need to set them back to what they were. So we're going to say that we're going to set it back to its grabbable color. That possible to pick up is now null, right? We don't, we need to fall into our holding an object, or we need to get out of this possible pickup, right? We now just need to say, if we drop this again, it's got to go back to null. So we're going to say that it's not possible to pick it up anymore because we already have something. And then we're going to say that the game object dot get component renderer material is hand color. Right, so this is going to set when we pick it up. We don't need it to say that it's possible to alert us to anymore. We've already know. So we're going to set the color back on our grabbable object to what it was, and we're going to set our hand color back to green. And then what we're going to do is come back up and if the drop point doesn't equal null, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add this before. And the reason for this is because we actually are going to use the object held. And when we set object held to null, all of a sudden we lose any ability to interact with it. So we're going to put this code here above it. We're going to say possible drop point dot transform dot parent. Remember, we're now going up the chain. Get component render dot material goes back to the drop point color. Right? We want to set that back. We're now dropping this off. We're then going to say that possible drop point is null. Right? We now don't have the drop point because we've already just dropped it off there. And then we're going to have object held, transform, get child, 0, get component renderer, material equals grabbable color. That sets us back to there. And that should be all we need to do. So let's double check this, make sure it's working. All right, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. So we can go over here, right? Now we go in and out. It gives us the alert. Oh, there's something you can pick up. Now this could easily, this is still, oh, we're not turning that one off. Let's figure that one out. That's interesting. So let's make sure. Grabbable. Let's go back to the code. This is when we're going away from it. We're holding the object. No, we're not holding it. So not holding it, there's a possible pickup. We have moved. We've moved the vector 3, possible to transform position is greater than 2, possible pickup, child 0, unrender material grabbable color. Possible pickup is null. Game object render and color. Grabbable color, possible pickup, transform child. Interesting. All right, well, let's see. That should not be happening, but it is. I will attempt to troubleshoot it later. But we at least can see it on the red one, right? And now when we pick it up, it goes back to red. When we drop it again, it says it's interactable until we move too far away. Let's see what happens when we pick that up. It is not. Changing back. All right, there's an issue there. I'll figure that one out in a few. But so then when we come here, we've got it picked up, right? We come close. Now both of them change. I drop it off. It snaps to it. I pick it up. It says that we can do something. All right. What happens when so we once again have that. All right, everything's working except that that thing will not turn back. Let's. Makes no sense. It's perfectly fine. I'm going to dig into that in a few minutes. But let's go ahead. Since everything else is quote working, I want to add one more code to this so that we. So okay, great. We can socket it, but how do we work with that, right? So if we come into our snap code, let's add another script. And let's call it snap checker. It's going to be a pretty short script. So if we go to much shorter than what we just did. So if we go to snap checker, all we want for this is an update. We do not need a start. We're going to start with a private bool. We're going to say object check equals false, because we just want to see if we're checked. So we're going to first say if we have not checked. We're going to first see if game object transform child count is greater than 0. So what is that doing, right? So we're checking on our cube game object. It's just going to go here on our game object, right? Because that's what we're attaching to. So we're going to check and see if anything is a child of that, right? So we're going to count how many children are there. And it just needs to be, it's going to be more than 0 if we add something there. So if that's the case, if we have more than that, we're going to say object checked equals true, which is great. And then we're going to do a switch statement. And this is going to be based off of the game object, transform, get child. We just want the first one because that's what we have the name on, and we're going to get its name, right? So we're going to switch on that. So case if battery, we'll say debug log. This could trigger any amount of things. Debug log wrong, do nothing, right? So we're trying to make sure that the taco is placed up here. Break that. So then if case taco, we're going to do a debug log correct, do something, break. And then we're just going to if game object dot transform dot child count 0, Then we can be check. Oh, needs to be 0 in there. Then we can say object check is false. This could be something that's triggered from when you press the button. There's lots of things that this could be triggered to. I'm just going to have it in an update. We don't have that much going on in this, which is perfectly fine. This is just going to allow us kind of constantly checking to see what's there. So we'll save that. We have it saved. Save this again. We'll figure out that problem in a minute. So on to our game object on our cube, right? Because that's what we're going to be checking a child of. We'll do our snap checker. Hit save. I'm going to hit the console over. And now when I come over here and I pick up the battery and I walk it over to our spot and I check it in, wrong, do nothing. So I'm going to grab it, drop it off over here, come over to our taco, which is not acting properly, but it's fine, and then correct, do something, right? We're just the color's the issue, we'll fix that in a bit. But now this could run other code, right? So if you set this into place, it triggers a door to open. It spawns more enemies. It destroys all the enemies. Whatever it is that placing this into that spot is going to do, you've got your trigger there. All right, let's see if we can figure out what that problem is. I'm going to pause this for a moment while I just dig through for a minute. I'll come back and let you know what it was. Well, I'm still not really seeing why it's doing that because it's working on one and not working on another. So I'm going to go ahead. I've just changed our grabbable colors materials to public so that we can see what's happening as we go, right? So we've got that. So I'm going to come over here and see, right? So we come over to that and it's setting it to red, which is great, and then it's setting it to blue T. So let's try. No idea why it's setting it to blue T. That's great. Because it's literally the same type of object. It should be happening in one. So let's try coming in here. Lost. Let's go back to our update and let's go to where the problem is we have a possible pickup. So this is where our problem is. Let's just mark it so I remember. Problem zone. Okay. We are going to possible. No, grabbable color. Grabbable color equals. Can I set that to null? Let's see what that does. Because it was staying red. So I'm wondering if that had an issue of it. Come over here first. We've got to be missing a boolean somewhere. Let me see. I think I'm missing something here. Let's see. This is why I make notes. Holding object. Possible, no gravel. Possible game object. We're gonna. No, it should. The moment it grabs that. So if there's nothing here, we're not holding something, and there's nothing to currently pick up. Checking to see two, we're going through our grabbable objects. We're getting a float of the possible grabbable object distance. We're checking to see if that is smaller. If that's the case, then the distance is equal to that. That's correct. And we're saying the possible object, so then it's going to fall through. Saying the possible pickup is null. We're going to set our grabbable color. Possible pickup, transform child. Material, possible pickup, transform child. We're going to set that to the alert color. And our game object, which is our hand, is going to go to the alert color. That is all correct. We should now set possible pickup to something. And then we've got our we're not holding it. There's something there. We're checking our vectors. We're saying that we're transforming it back to its color. We're setting it to null. Let's just try something. Because I'm wondering if it's just too close and it's doing something really quick. So I'm going to make that further. No, that is still... I'm going to do this real quick. Grabbable code. Debug.log grabbable color. I feel like it's throwing in two values really quick. It is. Okay, somehow we're getting a duplicate. But this is just giving us red. This is giving us two really fast. So let's just try, for absolute giggles. Weirder shit has happened in my life. We're going to delete Taco. And we're going to go ahead and create a new empty game object. Taco again. It's not going to be up there. We're going to bring it over here. put it to like 0.7. Actually, how high is it? 0.5. 0.5. I want to move it over here. We're going to attach a 3D cylinder to it. This shouldn't do anything. Turn off the capsule collider like we've done before. And we're going to go ahead and assign it the taco material. And we're going to give taco, like we did here, taco is going to get our grabbable. We'll save. Oh, and that thing's huge. Hold on. Don't want that big. I think it was 0.3. Yeah. 3.3.3. Okay. This is still fine. Pop my console back on. Huh. Alright, let me keep bugging this one. Hold on. Alright, I found part of the problem. It's apparently giving me another problem. So, just realized that I put this if statement into my loop. And so that's causing it to run twice, which is why we're then getting that. So, I'm going to cut that out. It still needs to stay into this if one, but it needs to just go after this for. So we're going to pop that in there. So that is going correct. I'm going to move these back to private because that's what finally helped me realize what was going on there. Switch these things back to the way they're supposed to be. Private. Okay, I'll save this. Let's see what happens now. Alright, so we come up here. We're great. And we're great now. We pick it up. It switches how it should. And oh, that was my problem. Okay. But that's there, so we just need to go back to the taco. What is this? 0.3. You put it in the center. We should set that off because it built another one. All right, let's just double check, make sure this is final right. All right, we have our red that we can pick up. Switches back to red. We're going to take it over to whatever our other half of our socket is. We can place it there. It gives us the code wrong, do nothing. So we're going to pull this back. We're going to drop it off over here. Pick up our taco. Come back to our drop-off spot. It now puts it in the right spot because I moved the transform position to the correct spot, and now we get correct do something. But we can pull it back off, and then it's going to re-say, oh, no, you're wrong. So that is how to set this up. I hope this is helpful for those of you that are doing some form of a puzzle that would take advantage of this. This can be used in a lot of different ways. So yeah, once again, I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.